also welcome back. How many here were in the last series? How many are coming for the first time? Oh, okay, about half and half. Did everyone receive an email with, anybody missed? No, but newcomer, did that to you. What I wanted to make sure tonight is those of you that weren't here last time that you received the information from the fall class. Did everyone receive that? Okay. And then I gave us just a little review in our notes. I don't know if you read those. It might be nice to read them out loud just to get us back in the feel of the rhythm of where we began in the fall series, and then if we can open to what either drew you back or encouraged you to come for the first time in this part of the series. So you can probably, Morgan can probably share with you, you can probably see what we're looking at here. You can see that what I've given you, it says Fall 2016 Class Review, the map of the territory, a few quotes to remind us of significant signposts on our shared journey along the way. It was the 4 classes I entitled The Brighter the Light, the Darker the Shadow, Sex is Everywhere and Everyone, What You Don't Know Will Hurt You, and Others, and Coming to Terms with Being Human. And there were 4 books which I recommended as resources. So there is a quotation from each of those books as reminders here. The first one, Owning Your Own Shadow by Robert Johnson. Would someone like to read that quotation? Okay, Monica?
The brighter the light, the darker the shadow. Owning Your Own Shadow, Robert Johnson. We would love to have creativity without destruction, but that is not possible. The balance of light and dark is ultimately possible and bearable. To own one's shadow is to reach a holy place, an inner center, not attainable in any other way. To fail this is to fail one's own sainthood and to miss the purpose of life.
That's not a subtle statement, is it? It kind of encapsulates or encourages, almost admonishes, but also gives a possibility. I like especially the balance of light and dark is ultimately possible and bearable. That's something we can come to both contain, hold, express, be a channel for, and to go to the center, to that holy place, which is our sort of Parker Palmer calls it our hidden wholeness, isn't attainable in any other way except this inner journey which we're taking. And then he said to fail that is to fail something really, really essential. As we entered this space, we all are probably aware that sexuality is one of those particular areas that has such power and so much energy that it's a place where we're easily tripped up as we look at and unknown parts of ourselves that are in the light and parts in the shadow. So would someone like to read the summary from class 2? Yes, Rupesh.
Sex, Sin, and Zen by Brad Warner. One of the Buddha's most important pieces of advice on how to have a life that doesn't suck was to avoid misusing sexuality. He didn't leave us with a concise list of do's and don'ts to let us know how that could be accomplished. He knew that such a list would be worse than useless. It's really up to us to find out what is and what is not the misuse of sexuality in our own lives. When I was talking to people about this book as I was writing it, I often ended up saying that its entire message could be summed up in 3 words: just be careful. Although I've said it a lot, it really boils down to that. Don't be reckless with sex. You can really hurt someone if you are, and you can really hurt yourself. Buddhists believe that the repercussions of all our actions spread across the world and even into the rest of the universe. We have a great responsibility. We shouldn't take it lightly.
So once again, not a subtle message, but a powerful one. That since this is such a potent energy, it's our responsibility to use the gift well, because it's so easy to harm ourselves or others with it. In the third class, I wanted us to begin to look at this challenge of our dual nature. Does someone want to read that one? Yes, Barbara.
What you don't know will hurt you and others. Nothing is missing, very a bit. We all face two challenges in accepting who we truly are. The first challenge is to accept our vulnerabilities and all those parts of ourselves about which we have grown up feeling ashamed and guilty, and about which we may be in denial. The second challenge is in facing the paradox of our perfection amid a life of suffering. Western psychotherapy has traditionally been focused on the first challenge, Buddhist practice on the second.
It's very concise, isn't it? It's very to the point. We have skillful means in Buddhist psychology, which helps us deal with our conditioned nature and all of its manifestations. And our Buddhist practice helps us with accepting our perfection, our wholeness, amidst accepting the reality of our everyday incarnate embodiment, which is basically kind of a mess, even in the best of lives. But we are human, and we have to face essentially the struggle of this dual nature, understanding our shadow, dealing with the fact that we're sexual animals, in this incarnate nature, and being human. We took this further in class 4. So someone want to read that one for us?
I'll read it.
Okay.
Living with the Devil by Stephen Batchelor.
We need a British accent for Stephen Batchelor because he's
No,
British. He's perfect.
Mara stands for those patterns of behavior that long for the security of clinging to something real and permanent, rather than facing the question posed by being a transient and contingent creature. Mara is that desperate longing for a self and a world that are comprehensible, manageable, and safe. Such clinging, however, turns into a kind of death. As its hold tightens, one feels as though life itself is being stifled and snuffed out. The devil is conquered not by forcibly expelling him, but by understanding his strategies and seeing through his charade of invincibility. Experiential insight into the nature of Mara is the key to freeing oneself from his grip.
So we see a lovely way in which he's saying that Mara is that aspect of ourselves that desperately longs and clings for that which we cannot have. And the insight into the key of freeing oneself has to do with turning toward that longing and that clinging, turning toward who we are as humans. And so we come back around to understanding shadow material. So you still think you're in the right class? Okay, these resonate with you in your life? So now we begin the next series. And what I did, and which I mentioned, is I attempted to take these 4 areas, which I thought were full enough for quite a lot of exploration, and take them deeper. And so when I was naming them, I tried to name them in a clever way so you get interested, you know. The first one, I realized I named Penetrating the Shadow with Courage. And afterwards I thought, wow, that's very male. When the female aspect of psychoanalytic development is active engulfment, not penetration. It's not the phallic thing, it's the engulfment. So I changed also to engulfing the shadow without hesitation. But what I like even better is down below, under the little dark symbol, under the quotations, I would say that this next series is about going deeper and opening wider. And I wasn't trying to make sexual symbolism. I actually realized that's precisely what we're doing. Isn't it? Yeah. It really wasn't a joke. But only after I wrote it down, I said, well, there's no escaping. You know, this is what we're doing. And if the fall series provided a map for our territory, then this is a guide to navigating the territory of darkness and light, maybe a little more. I restated these two quotations from Carl Jung about we don't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. It's very different than some spiritual systems that say if we could just move to the light, everything would be fine. But it always ends up biting us in the ass, you know. We only do that. And yet, as Merton says, in all things there is this hidden wholeness, which I mentioned. I ascribed it to Parker Palmer, but it's only because Parker Palmer quotes Thomas Merton I realized when I said it. Okay. So let's move to the poem Taken. I just found this recently. And it came with a connection with Paula Darcy, actually. She's the one who showed me this poem. And it resonated for me. I don't know if it does for you. Did you take a look at it? It really did. First, you must let your heart be broken open in a way you have never felt before, cannot imagine. You will not know if what you're feeling is anguish or joy, something predestined, or merely old wounds flowing once more, reminders of all that is unfinished in your life. Something will flood into your chest like air sweetened by desert honeysuckle, love that is too strong. You will stand there very still, not seeing what this is, and later you will not remember any of this until the next time when you say, yes, yes, I have known this before. It has come again, just as your eyes fold under once more. Now, it can sound at the end a bit cynical, but it just seems realistic to me. Is that we live in a cycle of opening and closing, of sunrise and sunset, and moonrise and moonset, and darkness and light, and realizations and forgetting, and breathing in and breathing out. This cycle is really what we live, I think. And we can so easily be propelled in both our psychological struggles and everyday workaday world, and certainly in our spiritual aspirations, to try to find the solid, special, stable goodness that will overcome everything once and for all. May we want the fairy tale that says, and they lived happily ever after. And there is no happily ever after. There is freedom within suffering every single day. Freedom every single day, every moment. Freedom within suffering, but not a happy ever after. So I have just a few more quotes here, not a lot, like I've done in the past, because I just wanted to orient us to this, going a bit deeper and opening this a little more in a more robust way for each other. And I have a quote from John Tarrant in a wonderful book called The Light Inside the Dark, and a bit from Stephen Mitchell in reflecting on this, and then some from Paula, which I used in Inquiry the other day. So let's just look at these briefly before we begin to do some active reflection here. Tarrant says, a great deal of our journey consists of alternating immersion in two realms, spirit and soul. Now, he's using terms that we don't typically use in Buddhism, but he's pointing, if you read the book, to boundlessness in form. He's talking about spirit, he's talking about emptiness or boundlessness. He is a Zen teacher. He also came from a Christian background. And then the soul talks about form, the way it's incarnate in a human. But if we were to find balance, another level of development is needed. This is the work of character. A term that I spoke about today a bit in Inquiry, saying how it's a term that is, I think, been lost in some ways in our vocabulary. We don't talk a lot about character, as if it's old-fashioned or something, as if there are qualities in our sort of, I don't know what to call it, I'm not a good linguist and philosopher, but post-intellectual kind of age, wherever we're in, where there is an emphasis on political correctness and rightness and wrong, and everything should be level and everything is equal, when everything isn't. There are qualities that are better than others. There are things that we value more highly than other things. And character points to those. Tempered by the suffering of soul's descent. In other words, tempered by the struggle of settling into what it means to be human. Leavened by the exuberance of spirit's rising. Character is the mixture where these two meet. What supports character, in turn, is integrity. Another word that we use sometimes just to think, it means like being trustworthy or something. But the term actually means to hold together in a way that's very solid and stable and has a capacity to withstand a lot. It's a very, very, very important word. So the capacity to integrate, we chant in the Soto Zen liturgies, something that is variously translated as the merging of difference in unity. The merging of difference in unity. In the Heart Sutra, it talks about form as emptiness. Emptiness is form. There are so many ways in the traditional language we talk about this integration. Integrity is the inner sense of wholeness and strength that arises out of our honesty with ourselves. It is the ability to make right connections and the proper sacrifices. Proper sacrifices, isn't that a great thing? How un-American. To find a life that is both moral and spontaneous. We could work on that phrase for a while, right? Character and integrity develop over time. The Buddhist name for such a person is the Bodhisattva. It's a unique languaging, I think. And I love people that are intelligent and have really thought deeply about something and give me a way of looking at something I think I know something about in a way that goes, oh yeah, that's really right. This is what he's talking about. I spoke in Inquiry today about the paramitas, the practices of perfection of a bodhisattva, as the way we understand character, and the expression and living of them as integrity, and generosity, morality or ethics, patience, energy and perseverance, concentration, meditation, and wisdom. These are qualities of the bodhisattva. And the bodhisattva practices their entire life with those qualities. They're not perfectible. The practice is the perfecting of a life that demonstrates both character and an integrity of being. In the foreword to this book, Stephen Mitchell, some of you are probably familiar with him. He's a wonderful translator and writer in his own way. He's now secondarily famous for being married to Byron Katie. Some of you know. He says, we crave not only what the soul craves, depth, darkness, embodiment, the poetry and turmoil of this world, any element that allows us to suffer and mature. In other words, getting down into the nitty-gritty. But we also crave the cravings of the spirit for light, purity, birth and death-ness, the dazzle of true insight and the unshakable knowledge of our primal identity. We can't go deep unless we're willing to go high. This wasn't Michelle Obama here. since the way up and the way down are one and the same. In order to understand this longing for spirit, for freedom, for enlightenment, we have to accept our humanness and our animal body. In order to live with an animal body, we have to realize we're not trapped in that only. They were more than that. And both live together. And his most famous quote in my teachings, which I've used often, on this journey, going means letting go. On this journey of awakening, going means mostly letting go. Going along the path means mostly letting go. Going means mostly letting go. In case you missed it. And then he says, almost cheekily, it's not all that hard to get enlightened. What's difficult is to keep giving up our sense of the world so that the world can come to us on its own terms with this vast, pitiless, loving intelligence. At the end of the journey, we return to the simplest of things with an immense recognition and gratitude. It's not that difficult to have moments in which you wake up beyond your small little self in a great sunrise, the birth of a child, when you fall in love, when you look into the face of someone who's kind to you as you witness someone passing from this world, whatever. All of us have had these things, where we really wake up to the truth that's beyond our small story. That's not hard. What's hard is to live there more fully, to open wider to that energy which begins to pour through us, to go deeper into what it means to live in a human body that way. And so that's why I think his instruction, to me, is so useful. That's why I've memorized it and use it all the time. What's difficult is to keep giving up our sense of the world, keep giving up self-centered dream, keep stepping beyond the way I think things are, so that the world can come to us on its own terms. And then this fantastic list with its vast, pitiless, loving intelligence. What a list of qualities, huh? Vast beyond comprehension, pitiless, not about you, or me, or anyone particular. Loving. And that not personal and completely inclusive, there's form and emptiness, vast, pitiless, which is the definition of love. And the stars at night, I forgot to put the subtitle on there, which I really love, when darkness unfolds as light. Paula, in this one piece here, was speaking about her grief as a young woman. In this book, she doesn't go into a lot of it, but it's part of the story that started her on this journey, in which most of you probably know her husband and her young child were killed in an auto accident that she was in. She was pregnant at the time. She survived, and then began her writing and her journey as her new child came into the world, and she attempted to survive such an unimaginable loss. And at one point she says in her writing, I wonder if I have the courage to accept this rare and beautiful gift called life, which is also able to wound in this way. It's a point in her grief where she's saying, can I do this? Is anyone in here not had a moment, sometime in their life, where you ask yourself, can I do this? Anyone not had that? Okay, just checking. You could go home.
Having it right now.
Yeah. And she says, with humility, this gift, it is now apparent, is something I have never understood at all. And actually, I don't think we can go very far along the spiritual journey if we also can't say that. Mm-hmm. I don't know what this is. I wonder who wants to live. That question seems important. It's sort of understatement. I wonder what wants to live. If I'm going to survive, if I'm going to go forward, if I'm going to make it past, and you have your list, I wonder what that is that wants to live. We see on the Han, great is the matter of birth and death, all is impermanent, quickly passing. Awake, awake, don't waste this life. This great matter. I mean, so many of us come to practice because we're not sure how to do that. We're not sure if we can face it. Very few people come to practice because they're doing really great. You know, really. Like, why would you do it? This kind of boring, painful, unpleasant thing. Like, my life is good. Well, she says later, in time perhaps the bewilderment and fright will lessen. Like Peg, I said that today. Right now I'm being washed clean and wrung out. She's talking about grief here. But then she, once again, becomes more transparent. The fact that I once thought I knew what life was about would make me laugh, if I could laugh. All my former certainties lie exposed. I remember fighting stubbornly to prove myself right about things and believing that I was right. That sentence basically is the description of everyday life. That's the description of samsara. I'm going to fight reality and think that I might actually win. But reality always wins, you know. I recall everything I took for granted. What was that, the life I was leading? Behind the facade, behind the image of the person I thought myself to be, is there a truth worth knowing? You know, we ask ourselves that too. Like, is there anything else in there? Yikes. What if my conditioning and all my little charades are all I am? Then she goes further. How many things were never seen, never guessed? What have I missed? A small clarity arises. I was not the center, even though I felt that way. I was not the center. The small story of my life was not the point. And then the big punchline. It left so much unborn. People cling to creating their life, their way, theirs, and miss the immensity of what's possible. So much unborn. We want to have it just this small way. But you get to choose. Nobody's forcing you to wake up. So do these have resonance somehow? Like, what would you say? Say a few things that let me know that they're in resonance. What are you hearing in here, seeing in here that's going, you know what, that really speaks to me in some way? You're shaking your head. I see Jessica grimacing now and then.
Yeah, this bit by Paula Darcy is really potent for me.
Which one?
This last bit by Paula Darcy.
How so?
Even just the first sentence, I wonder if I have the courage to accept this rare and beautiful gift called life.
You know, in a way, when we come into the Zendo and we bow toward our cushion and we turn and bow to the Sangha and then sit, that action is that statement, that question. Just to sit is always the question. Gosh, I wonder if I can do this. I wonder what it means to sit here. I wonder what it means, because that's what you're doing, is you're going to face your life. Looks like the wall, but you're there. Any other things journeying around?
Well, the two things that you
Highlighted?
it seems like the second one answered the first.
You noticed.
I wonder what wants to live. Well, it's all this that's unborn. That's what wants to live.
Everything.
And it's also what's scary is because you don't know what it is.
And so what we do is we set about picking and choosing. I would like this life, but not that life. I want this part of me, but not that part of me. And of course we make choices about what we express, how we live, what we share. But if we don't come to terms with it all, it leaks out in ways that are not so good often.
I think it's just a good reminder to have the courage to step out of our small selves. I just need constant reminding that there's so much more.
Yeah. That's part of what we have people like children and spouses and friends for.
gets me is the small story of my life and how to know if I'm outside the small story or just.
How would you know?
I know, how would you? I don't know.
Well, I'll give you the small, incomplete, smart-ass answer.
Okay. I'm a smart ass, that works.
Are you suffering? If there's any suffering, small story. No?
Yeah, I'm really struck by the first line in the Robert Johnson quote. We would love to have creativity without destruction, but that is not possible. And the relationship between creativity and destruction, and who or what is created and who or what is destroyed.
It's just life. If you look around, that's all that's happening. Birth and death, the great matter. But we want it one way. It's like I say, I'm not saying this just because of your vocation, but I say often in Christian settings where I'm teaching, I say, boy, we love Easter, but boy, hate the cross. We want the resurrection, but not what it took to get there.
Well, I'm struck too how some very creative people are also very destructive, and how they destroy themselves for their creativity.
Yeah, that's a certain kind of bargain with Mara, isn't it?
Yeah.
I won't take my bipolar medication so I can continue to create, even if it destroys me and other people. One little example, but yeah. And how much that passion of the mind, how do we harness it? How do we use it for good? How do we not dull or dim it? And also, how do we not inflict it?
Well, that's the next part, the balance.
Yeah. That's why in here I put the little dark and the light symbols and the yin and yang. It's like we were kind of playing with these things. How do we move? That's our real question, isn't it?
But also with that Robert Johnson, it feels like a call to action, like there's an urgency to own one's shadow, is to reach a holy place, and to fail this is to miss the purpose of life, and it makes you think, well, okay, like I gotta do something, I gotta own my shadow. And then how do you do that?
That's your entire life. It's not a separate thing you do so that your life will have meaning. It's the meaning that you're creating by living your life fully. And I think that's just an ongoing process that we do. We have forms that we engage in, practice forms. We have relationships that we commit ourselves to. You know, when you decided to have these two children, you're a different person, right? Because they change you, you change them by your parenting, you and Scott, your worlds change, and then you're negotiating the whole world around you. It's not like a separate thing you're doing. The limitations that come because you commit yourself to something, you can feel what pushes against the limitations. The limitations you offer yourself by taking vows gives you the container to actually go deeper. There are many things that move the energy in the direction he's talking about. Basically, all he's saying is, don't go to sleep, and don't think just seeking the best and highest and the prettiest is everything.
Well, it's in the muddy water, you get the lotus.
Right.
But it seems like he wants you to be more active about it. Like you better, like, purposefully take some hard looks at things. And is that just sitting at the wall?
No, I don't think it's just sitting at the wall.
Okay.
I think sitting at the wall trains you for the time when you have to have a hard look at something that you can barely tolerate. And what you do by looking at the wall and sitting there with other people and engaging the forms is learning the capacity for patience and perseverance, you know, those qualities, and generosity, offering yourself to it, and yet a moral action, staying upright as you train in concentration and wisdom, so that you provide a container that can hold what you're going to face. You know, Paula didn't know that she'd have this loss. You hadn't had that loss. You think, oh geez, you know, how could I? It's unthinkable. So we have to prepare for everything, not because life is, you know, horrible, oh my God, but we'll get our share. We don't know what it's going to be. Otherwise, we just get caught in more and more fear and more contraction. It's like who Paula Poundstone was saying the other day. She said, I get more and more paranoid every day, and I can't keep up. Like we get more and more contracted, and there's no end to it. You know? Made it into a joke, but
I guess I was thinking of it as being the shadow inside of us, in our own hearts, and not something bad out in the world that could happen to you.
both. Because if you don't own some of the more shadowy parts, and shadow doesn't mean violent, horrible, you know, it just means what you don't own, what you're not willing to turn toward. It might be something that others would find of positive quality, but you can't own. For example, at the Zen Teachers Association meeting that Peg and I were just in this last weekend, one of the interesting shadow elements that I saw in one of the small breakout groups was how difficult some people have in stepping into their role as a teacher. Like, what it was a shadow element was what their teacher and their students were asking them to do. I can't do that. You know, I don't want to know that part of me. I don't want to fulfill whatever I'm being asked. So that can be shadow too. What is it that we say no to, that we refuse? John Tarrant sometimes says there are no conditions under which it is wise to refuse life. And our practice helps us live in a way that will say yes to everything. That doesn't mean indulge and express with ease, but come to terms with and relate to and be intimate with everything. That's probably true.
I have a question of where Paula's going with this. So she's gone through this difficult loss, and I haven't read the book. I understand her husband and child died, but let's just put an additional face on that and say it was a drunk driver that was acting negligent that ran into the car.
I think it was.
Was it?
It was,
okay,
yeah.
well, there's a lot of drunk drivers.
Yeah.
So then you've also got this face of negligence that also kind of felt like it took something away from you even.
Yeah.
So her small
So then you
story,
could have rage, you could have resentment, you could have
yeah, you have all these things. So
victimization.
when she says that my small story, my life was not the point, it left so much unborn, does that, I mean, how is she, I don't understand how she's carrying that loss and that frustration and that anger with that statement.
You would have to read more, and I'm not trying to deflect your question,
Yeah.
because it's a perfectly good question. And she does speak in other books and other places in this book about the different aspects. Here she, in this book she was trying not to revisit what she's already written, but the editors wanted her to include that story as the beginning part, and so she did in a way that is attempting to help the reader understand there's a possibility to turn something that seems immensely and irrevocably dark towards light, and so you have to ask some pretty deep questions. It's not that she didn't wrestle with all of those things, she did.
I could see part of it being like you remove the whole concept of fair. You know, it's like you just let go of that one. That one doesn't exist.
Right. It's
know?
this.
Yeah.
How do I relate to this?
Yeah.
A life that is such an immense gift and is able to wound in this way, she says.
Pitiless.
What's that?
Pitiless.
Yeah, pitiless. Later in the book, she writes to some extent about her walk with one of her good friends, who's a nun, Joyce Rupp, another wonderful writer. They walked the Underground Railroad. The slaves walked, and what happened to them along that path, and who they met, and what the responses were, and what happened. And, you also get a chance to hear her speak about what it's like to pay homage to and tribute to, at some peril and with some great difficulty, something that other people did because it was essential they had to save their life. What it's like to walk that way. So I would really recommend the book. It's quite good. I used some of these quotes, you know, in Inquiry a couple of weeks ago, speaking about this, and then Paula and I are going to have lunch, and she lives here, and she said, would you bring my book and read me the stuff that you read, because everybody's talking to me about it. I want to know what you read. And so we began to discuss these things, these very questions. And so I would read it to her, and she's like, wow, it sounds so different coming out of you. So then these words that had meaning to her have now a different meaning as we share them. But this is what happens here, too. There is a way that in Buddhist psychology, there's so many ways to do this, but there is a way in Buddhist psychology in which you can look at the various aspects of your own self and your own shadow, and that's the 6 realms of conditioned existence, which I have, these different realms. It's just a sort of an architecture in a way of being. And this is not an exhaustive class on the 6 realms of conditioned existence. But the question is, are we willing to explore each of these realms as aspects of ourselves? So, the first, you can put them in whatever order. Let's look at the animal realm, okay? These were originally written in ways that described realms of existence for beings through lifetimes of reincarnation. That's not required to use these as archetypes of parts of ourselves. Somebody read the animal realm. Let's hear the description there.
The animal realm.
There you go.
Animal beings are marked by stupidity, prejudice, and complacency. They live sheltered lives, avoiding discomfort or anything unfamiliar. Rebirth in the animal realm is conditioned by ignorance. People who are ignorant and content to remain so are likely headed for the animal realm, assuming they aren't there already. Disorienting tendencies of this type of contraction. The animal realm is our over-concern for territory, danger, and the desire to settle into a comfortable, lazy stupor.
Admit it. Don't we have these parts of us? You know? And sometimes we do it with our animals. I want to just curl up on the sofa with the dog or the cat, you know. This isn't, these aren't bad things. But if you don't understand these aspects of yourself, then there can be disorienting tendencies and contractions which tend to get in your way. Well, let's just go through them first. There's a lot we can say about each of these things. Hell realm. Yes, Darcy.
As the name suggests, the hell realm is the most terrible of the 6 realms. Hell beings have a short fuse. Everything makes them angry. And the only way hell beings deal with things that make them angry is through aggression. Attack, attack, attack. They drive away anyone who shows them love and kindness and seek out the company of other hell beings. Unchecked anger and aggression can cause rebirth in the hell realm. Disorienting tendencies of this type of contraction. The hell realm is our over-concern with righteousness, anger originating from a sense of victimization, and impatience with the unpredictable nature of the world.
Ouch. I can see that one coming. I know.
Mm-hmm.
And when we are caught in these things, it feels like hell, doesn't it? Literally, in those moments when you're just burning, you know. Let's just go through them. The realm of the hungry ghost.
The realm of hungry ghosts.
One of my favorites.
Hungry ghosts are pictured as beings with huge empty stomachs, but they have pinhole mouths and their necks are so thin they cannot swallow. A hungry ghost is one who is always looking outside himself for the new thing that will satisfy the craving within. Hungry ghosts are characterized by insatiable hunger and craving. They are also associated with addiction, obsession, and compulsion. Disorienting tendencies of this type of contraction. The realm of the hungry ghosts is our over-concern with what is lacking or insufficient, and with comparisons to an idealized past and idealized others.
The foundation for almost every reality TV. Seriously, think about it.
It isn't covered by the hell realm anyway.
Huh?
That isn't covered by the hell realm.
Right, right. If you're not covered by the hell realm, the hungry ghost will. And then they get married. But our culture is a huge amount of our culture situated around this, as you can see. But let's not stop there. The realm of Titans.
The realm of Titans are strong and powerful beings who are sometimes depicted as enemies of the gods. Titans are marked by their fierce envy. The karma of hate and jealousy causes rebirth in the Titan realm. Disorienting tendencies of this type. The Titan realm is our over-concern with envy for what others have, with a sense of frustrated entitlement and a constant struggle.
These are beings that think they're the strong ones and won the election. And there are other pieces of that, but you know, that sense of but there's that underbelly of envy, underbelly of vulnerability, under that. So it's important to understand, for them to understand them, you have to understand the God realms. So, next.
The realm of gods and heavenly beings. In Buddhist tradition, the heavenly realm is populated by godlike beings who enjoy great power, wealth, and long life. They live in splendor and happiness, yet even the gods grow old and die. Further, their privilege and exalted status blind them to the suffering of others. So in spite of their long lives, they have neither wisdom nor compassion. The privileged heavenly beings will be reborn in another of the 6 realms. Disorienting tendencies of this type of contraction. The God realm is our over-concern with self-infatuation, pride, intoxication or fabricated experience, and indifference to others.
We won't name who that describes. But you see how it's so connected to the Titans and why they fight? And, once again, where is that place in you? And the human realm?
The human realm. The human realm is the only realm of the 6 from which beings may escape samsara. Enlightenment is at hand in the human realm, yet only a few open their eyes and see it. Rebirth into the human realm is conditioned by passion, doubt, and desire. Disorienting tendencies of this type of contraction. The human realm is our over-concern with the effort to possess experience, to find certainty and meaning, and to control the future through understanding and planning.
So this over-concern here sounds like what we're taught to value, doesn't it? It sounds like, oh wow, if you're a grown-up, then you want to own your life and find certainty and meaning, control the future. You understand? It sounds like that's good, right? So here's what I'd like for you to do. For just the next maybe 10 minutes, pick 1 or 2 of your favorites here and just do some free writing about how you see this in your own life, in yourself, and how you think that over-concern limits you. So I'm curious, in just this brief little exploration, it's very small, I know. Was there anything that was a bit of a surprise or something that kind of was interesting to you that you discovered? Anything that you would say about something in your life? You don't have to, but I'm curious if you have something you want to share.
I was struck by how quickly I could translate these into IFS parts of myself.
Yeah, they're like early Buddhist parts.
And then see how, once I look at one, then others just immediately pop up and how they interact with each other. For
Yeah.
instance, for me, the animal realm and the Titans.
Uh-huh. You see which ones have particular relationships or feuds.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you can open these wider and go deeper with them, you know.
Yeah.
They're really nice things to follow. We're only having a taste tonight, of course, of this. And
I was gonna say, some of the descriptions for human sound very human to me. But what I thought was interesting was in hell, righteousness and impatience. That's something I very much identify with human. You know,
all of these are expressed in humans.
Yeah, I know, but it's just something I just feel like it's around me all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's something very present, at least in this culture and,
Sure.
and anywhere else I go. So it's just.
And if that's the case, if we see it around us all the time, what's the challenge? What's the gift? What's our responsibility? And we start asking these questions about, so what do I do with this? There's something that's being offered to me. What's my responsibility? What's the challenge? What am I unwilling to face? What does it call forward in me? You could ask these kinds of questions about any of these.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really useful to notice. Anything else of curious nature?
Well, you said focus on the one that you don't. You resist it or didn't.
Yeah.
Because I remember you were going by, and I love the name Hungry Ghost. It's a great name. But I thought, why is Hungry Ghost? I didn't really get it about the part about comparisons and idealized past and idealized others. I didn't quite get that, so I thought about that for a while. And I kind of thought about nostalgia, which is easy to have if you live in Austin for any period of time. But I thought I noticed I'm becoming more and more nostalgic in some ways. I thought that can be kind of harmless, but it can also be kind of self-delusional because I started to think about it how it could be both as a yearn for kind of simplicity, but it's also a space you'll never fill because you'll never, first of all, it never existed, and then second of all, you in that hunger for the way things used to be.
The good old days.
The good old days, making things great again. You can never recreate that in your present life, and so you'll always be hungry for that. For something that never took place.
That's right.
So the more I thought about it, the more I thought, yeah, that can be kind of a dangerous state of mind to never dwell in.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I was just thinking about how each of these realms is always available in every moment. So we have our tendencies, our favorites, you know, but they're always all available. We are always actively choosing from one of those realms to inhabit in any moment, but they're all always ready to hand.
Yeah.
And we're habituated to a certain one, you know. So I think that's kind of our existence.
Some are more in the light, some are more in the dark. But
some we'd rather not know that we're occupying, you know.
Or we project onto others.
Or we project onto
Can't
others.
accept in ourselves, we'll put it on you.
For a different reason, I went right to the Hungry Ghost, not that part sort of confused me, or I didn't quite understand the part about, idealizing some things, like maybe the past, but for me, immediately, it was how the craving of what a family should look like. Yeah.
Anybody who's had a not so happy family, you have a craving of what you wished it would have been, or could be.
Right, and that craving, but what the aha moment was for me, just in journaling, was like, yeah, I know I'm doing that, and I'm trying to let go more, but then it was like, oh my God, all the expectations and just letting go more and more. God, I may be pleasantly surprised. I've never considered that possibility. And that's a possibility.
That's right.
By
Or
letting go
you
more.
miss the perfection that's right around you all the time.
Yes.
Waiting for the good one to come.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as saying the good one, but just let go and just sort of float. That it may be just wonderful, but less suffering for me and the expectations and for everybody concerned.
It's a great possibility.
I noticed
with the human realm. I mean, it was this tendency, it opened up something, because I've had a really tough past month, and somebody's actions have been, it's really painful, and I keep trying to say, well, maybe it's an unconscious part, and maybe it's the gift to like work with this part, but then this helped me see, well, maybe it's none of that. And because that's that's myself again. Maybe it's just none of that. It has nothing to do with any of that. You keep trying to find meaning, but then that meaning to try to make yourself feel better is actually not doing you any good either.
That could be another kind of craving. It just gets really tangled, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, when we do our confession here and we say all our ancient tangled karma from beginningless greed, hate, and delusion, this is what we're speaking about. It's like you pull one little thread, and boy, it's like, and we think we know, but we don't really in some ways, what Paula was talking about, as we look deeply. Thank you.
I kind of follow one time. I don't think I articulated very well before. What was interesting is like the animal realm, one of the features is territorial. That feels very animal. You know, in the hungry ghost, you get it. It's like what's lacking, it's hungry, it can't satisfy. And then the titans and the gods, their features are self-explanatory. What I thought was this interesting was like I could have read the description for hell, over concern with righteousness, victimization, and patience. And if I would have read this for the first time, if you would have told me it wasn't hell and human, I would have thought that fit too.
Yeah.
So could you expand a little bit more on how human and hell is different?
Not really. I think that's something for you to discover. I mean, these are just very brief descriptions of ancient typologies, which help us understand. Whenever you're caught, or I'm caught, in that angry, reactive stuff, that's a human experiencing the hell realm.
Right, I get it. All this
Yeah.
is, you can experience it, yeah.
Right.
I just thought that those two actually have some very close similarities where the other ones are a little bit more, I could kind of see them on their own.
Yeah, and so if there's one that's more, that you can see that, oh, that's the one that I blend with a little more.
Yeah.
You know, that's actually more interesting, because now these others, like, oh, I can see them as separate, but this, it's a little fuzzier, so that's the interesting, it's the edge that gets confusing for you, because there's a good place to investigate.
I was just hoping you'd tell me the answer.
I know. That's right. That I could feel like a god or a titan, and you could feel like a hungry ghost. Yeah. Actually, yes, both of you. Yeah, please, both of you.
I tend to consciously identify mostly with the hungry ghost kind of category.
Consciously?
Well, I'd say just all of these are clearly present, but this is the one that's most recurrent in my psyche. And for me, what ends up happening often is I'm setting it up in opposition, like this idea of wanting to be in a million different places, be doing and idealizing others, idealizing other ways of being. And now I'm working a lot with the practice of trying to be more wholehearted in my actions every moment, you know, and specifically working around with wholeheartedness and sincerity in that moment. And I'm trying not to frame it as an opposition, and you know, in the vein of what we're speaking about with the light and the dark intermingling, and
so I would recommend a practice then.
Yeah.
If you engage wholeheartedness and what was the other quality?
Sincerity.
Sincerity, right. Engage wholeheartedness and sincerity toward the hungry ghost in you. Meet that from a more rooted and see what that hungry ghost part needs or wants from you that might transform into that. So instead of them being polarized, put them into a compassionate embrace and see what we find. Yeah.
That was very much what I was going to say in my writing. When I picked the two that had grabbed me and irritated me and dug into them, the writing went in the direction of what's really going on, how do you get out of this? And then when I was finished and I looked at the others, and I didn't think of myself as being, whatever, the animal realm, for instance, I compassion for that person. Because there was, the judgment was when I was trying to fix myself or didn't like something, but the freedom to see this as someone else gave me the freedom to meet it compassionately.
Yeah, then you could open it a different way.
So I want to try that practice.
Yeah, that's great. Is that Cassie?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, let's see, we have just a few minutes left. I may go over a minute. The reason we're facing this large TV, because now we're gonna have a little fun with this, as if we haven't already. Imagine for a moment that you were someone who was born into a realm that seems like the gods and titans. Like everything was cool, it was all about power. You were, why is this?
So you have to select Apple TV?
There it is.
You have to select Apple TV on your...
Yeah, it's coming, I just
Yeah.
wasn't seeing the signal thing.
Yeah, it was up. And you might have to check the sound preferences.
Yeah. You're teaching me how to do this. Headphone port.
All right, that's good. That's
Okay.
what you want. Okay, so just close it.
Yeah, I got that. I'll close it in a second. And so imagine that you were born into that kind of thing, but you were also born with a body that had mental illness and addiction, hungry ghost, as a primary base. And you, you'll see, this is a fun way to express every single one of these in a person who's not an example of perfection, who's an example of being human. And what it's like as she expresses this back to other people in a way that's really fun.